Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Amanda.
And we're your hosts.
We're a traveling couple and digital nomads taking you on our adventures as we explore locations, destinations, and careers.
Enjoy the show.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the World Wanderers podcast. I'm excited that you are joining us for today's episode of the show. And today on the podcast, Ryan and I are thrilled to be joined by our friend, Mack Lawrence. She is a fellow traveler, a fellow digital nomad, and the host and founder of The Sweaty Traveler. This is an amazing podcast that you should definitely go check out. We were just recently guests on it, and she talks about how to keep it real while we're traveling abroad. And that's very much what we're going to be diving in with Mack on today's episode of the podcast. So we're going to start by talking about how she got interested in travel, how her digital nomad adventures evolved, why she was inspired to create The Sweaty Traveler, and then we'll dive into why it's so important to show the not-so-glamorous side of travel and to really keep it real as people who are out in the world showing places. So not just showing those perfect Instagrammable moments, but also showing, the sweaty moments or the challenging moments. And so Mack shares a lot about that with us here today. This is a super fun conversation. It made us miss hanging out with her here in Mexico, and we hope that you enjoy it as much as we did. Before we get into the interview with Mack, we just wanted to remind you about the World Wanderers Insider. The Insider is our exclusive community for Patreon supporters where we teach people how to become digital nomads, and we do that through interviews with ourselves as well as other digital nomads so that you can learn how other people are working remotely, working and traveling, and all the different ways that they've been able to successfully make that happen. So if working and traveling has been something that you've been excited about and that maybe you want to try and that you're not really sure where to get started, definitely come join us on the Insider. It's over at patreon.com/The World Wonders. All right, now on to the interview with Mack Lawrence from The Sweaty Traveler. Welcome to the podcast today, Mack. How are you doing?
I am doing so great. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, we're stoked to have you here. And can you tell listeners where you're joining us from?
Yeah, I'm currently sitting in Columbus, Ohio.
Amazing.
So,
we need to come visit.
You do. We need to do a tour of Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati, just not in the winter.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not down for going that north in the winter.
No, absolutely not. I would not even recommend doing that. I'm actually going to come visit you guys in the winter in Mexico.
Yeah, it's a better plan. We gather south in the winter and then north in the summer.
Love it.
Amazing. So there's so much we want to chat about with you today, but we thought we would start a little bit with your travel story. So if we can back up and just talk about, how you kind of fell in love with travel, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So for as long as I can remember, I've loved the idea of travel. I didn't really travel abroad until I was out of college, but it was always something that I wanted to do. My grandparents are from Italy, so I always wanted to go back to Italy. Don't really have family there now, but the idea of going to see them, and Italy's like my favorite place on earth. So that's always like the one goal that I wanted to hit was like going to Italy. And I remember my first trip like far away, which was San Francisco from Columbus, was with my mom when I was 12. And I remember I was so excited to get up and go to the airport, and my mom let me wear my pajamas to the airport. Like looking back, like it's so embarrassing. It was like Bobby Jack, if you know like what Bobby Jack is. And so I was like wearing my Bobby Jack pajamas, and we just went, and it was actually for my grandma owns a quilt shop. So she won this trip out to San Francisco and was going to this like sewing conference. So my mom and I got to go and just like do whatever the entire time. And so I went to like the Pacific Ocean for the first time, and we just like ate all this amazing food and went to craft shows and museums and Alcatraz. And at that moment, I was like, I never want to stop doing this. And so literally since I was 12, I started saving money to go on a big trip to Europe whenever I could. I didn't know when it was going to be. And throughout the next period of my life, I kept asking friends and family if they wanted to travel with me, and they'd always say yes. And whatever, and nobody ever ended up being able to go. So when I was 19, I was like, screw this. I'm going to book a flight to Europe and just go by myself. And so that's what I did. I booked a flight to Portugal, and then I did Paris, Italy, Where else? I went all around Italy, all around France, and then a little bit in Portugal. And that was my first 6-week trip that I did. And that was like my first big thing. And I haven't stopped since.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, we can definitely relate to that experience after we were like after college, went to Europe for the first time. And we're like, oh, this is amazing. We just want to keep doing this.
Yeah, it's addicting. That was when I was 19, probably like 5 years ago now. 5 years ago. So I've been traveling ever since, and I've been traveling solo ever since then as well.
Yeah, what was it about, do you think, like the adventure, the seeing new places, new cultures? What was it that kind of drew you and made you think like, hey, this isn't something I want to do like a couple weeks of the year. This is something I want to build my life around. I
honestly don't know. It's something I can't explain it. It's literally just been inside of me my entire life. Like even before I started traveling, I had felt like that. But once I was there, I never wanted to stop. The people and like trying something new every day. I don't like doing the same thing every day. I actually hate it. I have certain routines in my life that I like to keep, but I like to go out and experience new things even in my own city. And so I think the adventure and the not knowing and the really like just pushing yourself out of your comfort zone is what I really love about travel. And the funny thing is when I landed in Paris for the first time, I had like a total freak out. I was like, I actually don't know if I like this. Like, what am I doing? I don't know how to speak French. I don't like know how to get around. I don't know how to use the metro. And I had like almost like a mini panic attack. And I was like, I can't believe I'm doing this alone. Like I'm a crazy person. I actually called my mom and I was like, I want to come home. And she's like, hop on a plane if you want, but I think you can and should do this. And I didn't really find my groove in that first trip until after like the first week. And so it was really intimidating and overwhelming. But once I like had that confidence to keep going, that's kind of where I am now. And I just haven't stopped. So.
Yeah, I feel like I can really relate to the feeling of like knowing you just want to keep doing this thing and feeling like it's just been a part of you. Because I feel like I had the same experience too. Like, I mean, when I was little, I went to like Disneyland and then Disney World. And then we went to Mexico one time, but we went to like Cancun and stayed at a resort. Yeah. And I feel like there was just something that in me that like was like alive and like, I want to keep doing this. Like even when I was really young, like I'm going to keep doing this when I'm older. And then once I actually got to like explore the world on my own and start kind of traveling the way I wanted to, I was like, okay, I'm like a complete addict to this. Like I'm obsessed. I just can't stop doing this.
Yeah, and it is like very hard to explain why. Sometimes, especially to people who don't travel or don't understand what travel can do for someone. I think it's really hard to explain like why you get addicted to it. Like now, I can tell you reasons I love travel, but I can't really tell you like why I literally want my entire life to be travel. You know?
Mm-hmm, for sure. And I think there's like people on the other side of it where like, you know, they like having a home in one place and spending the majority of the year there, which is totally fine, right? Like it's okay for people to be like that too. And I think it's hard because we don't understand those people. And I feel like they don't understand us. Like I have lots of friends that are like, how do you just like live out of like a backpack or a suitcase for like basically the majority of the year? And I'm like, I just don't really know how to answer that question. Like, it's just not that hard. Like, obviously there's times where I'm like, oh, it'd be nice to have a full closet of clothes and more than 3 pairs of shoes. But for the most part, it's like not even something that phases me day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. I can relate to that as well. And it's funny, like right out of college, I had like these corporate jobs. And then there were times when they like wouldn't give me vacation. This is terrible. So I would literally just quit and like go and travel. And that's when my mom's like, I don't really think that this is for you. Like, I don't think like a 2-week vacation is going to be for you. So that's when I kind of started looking at like other options for like remote work, because I was like, corporate isn't going to be enough for me to just like, I have to stop quitting like these jobs since they're not giving me enough vacation time.
Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to ask. So like, what did you, I guess maybe even going back before getting the corporate jobs and quitting the corporate jobs, what was kind of your thought process like at that time of like, how do I build a life that has travel in it?
Before like I had those corporate jobs like in college, I didn't even really know. I knew that I wanted to travel. I didn't really have a plan for it. I was like, oh, I'll just travel when I have like those 2-week vacations. And then once I got into the corporate jobs, I was like, oh, like 2 weeks is not enough. Like weekends are not enough. I was flying back and forth from Portland and Washington and all these places like over a weekend. And I was exhausted all the time and I wasn't getting to actually experience any of those places. And finally I was like sitting at one of my corporate jobs and I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like I want to go back to Europe. I didn't really know like digital nomad or like what remote work, like I didn't know that was like a thing, but I was like, there has to be a way for me to like get clients and like work online, which I know now is remote work. So I just started like emailing people and reaching out to people to see if I could intern for them, like for a couple months just to get some experience. And once I realized I could actually like make money that way, I quit my other corporate job. And I remember the day, it was December 20th. And on that day, I was like, I'm never, ever going back to a corporate job. Like I will somehow find a way to just make it work traveling and working on the road.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love hearing that. It's always inspiring to hear like other people who have taken that step. And I think, again, it's something where people will ask like, how did you do it? And I think it's like everyone can do it if they want to. It's not that you've done something that's like, you know, miraculously impossible or like we've done the same thing. It's just like this desire to do it because it's not necessarily going to be like the easy path, but it's going to be like the most rewarding path if that's what you want. Can you walk us a little bit through like what it's kind of looked like since you quit that corporate job?
Yeah. So I don't know if any of your listeners have ever heard of the Extra Pack of Peanuts travel podcast. They were kind of the reason that I was able to quit and start getting clients. So I love Heather and Travis are the hosts of that podcast. Love them to death. They're really great friends now. I loved them all through college. I listened to them literally on my way to nanny, on my way to class. Like I would listen to their podcast nonstop. And I was like, this is the life that I want. And so one day I literally think I was drunk. I typed up this email to Heather. I was like, I think I sent it to like info@extrapackofpeanuts.com. And I was like, hey, like, I really would love to intern for you. I think that I have like great experience in social media marketing. Like I haven't graduated yet, but I would just love to like help you guys out. Like anything you need. I was like, I could learn to podcast it. Even though they've literally had like 1 million downloads, like they don't need a podcast editor. Like they're doing fine. I was like, anything you need, like I want to learn from you guys. And I like forgot that I sent that email. And so it was a couple months down the line and I landed in London. And literally right when I laid my head down on my hostel pillow, I opened my phone and Heather emailed me and she was like, hey, like I would love to interview you for like this intern position that you like asked for. And she's like, that was the most well-written email we've seen. And I was like, okay, I was drunk, but I'm not going to tell you that. And so I started working for them and we had like a little bit of a trial run. And I was like, looking back, it was probably too long, but I was like, I'll give you 3 months of like social media marketing for free. And you can tell me how you like it. I'll do your Instagram stories. I'll do your posting, write your copy, all that stuff. And they were like, cool. And I also they hired me in the end of May and they were like, oh, in June, we're doing a get together in Portland. I was like, cool, I'll come buy a ticket. So I bought a ticket, met them in Portland for the first time, did all of like their social media there. And after that 3 months, she was like, can we hire you as like, can we be one of your clients? And I was like, oh yeah, I guess that's what the next step would be. So I went from there and they like gave me referrals and gave me testimonials. And they really like gave me the confidence to go out and do that on my own. And so while I was doing this for them, I was working at my corporate job. So I would literally take my lunch break and take calls with clients. I would take like days off and like work with clients. And I was at my computer at my corporate job, like doing client work, which I don't know how I didn't get caught doing. Like I would take my laptop home from the corporate job and like work on client work there. It was crazy. And then finally, Heather and Travis were like, I think that you like have enough clients. Like, I think you could go out and do this on your own. So December 20th of that year, I was like, I'm quitting. I put that was my last day. And then ever since then, I've been working with different clients, mostly social media marketing, email marketing, just like overall digital marketing strategy. And I've been able to go to Mexico and I've been able to, beep up around the United States and do the Pacific Coast Highway. And it's just been really nice to have that freedom and realize that I don't need the 401k and health insurance and like all of that stuff. Like I can figure that out as I go. That was a long answer to your question, but here we are.
No, that was great. That was great. Thank you for taking us through all of that. And it's just really cool to hear how like it just started from like sending an email that was probably, you know, scary to send and then waiting for a response and getting that a few months later and then offering yourself your services for free and then doing a really good job proving that you can do this work and then just getting word of mouth referrals, which is one of the best ways to kind of, you know, grow yourself and grow your business essentially. And now it's so cool to see that you're at a point where you can like work from anywhere in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome. And I think like once you get that confidence of like having your first client, you're like, oh, I can do this again. Like, oh, I can send the scary email. I can pitch myself. I can pitch my services. And it's just like, I think like every step and every client you get, it just builds your confidence a little bit more that you can do this in the long term.
Yeah, kind of like that snowball effect and having people who can like, you know, if they know people who do similar things and need similar things, they can recommend you. It's just so important. And I love that you like took the initiative to do that as well of like, hey, I'll do this. I'll work for free. I'll prove myself. I think a lot of people get in this zone of like, maybe I work in a corporate job and like my skill set doesn't apply elsewhere. So like I need to like comb job listings to find the right opportunity for me, as opposed to just being like assertive about finding something you like and be like, hey, can I help you with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I knew it was a problem when I would fly home. I have friends in Portland. I love Portland. So I would fly home from Portland on like a Monday morning at 6 a.m. Like I'd spend the whole weekend there. And then I would get into work at 8. And then I would be like at 10 o'clock, I'm like, can I take my lunch? And then I would nap in my car. And then I would like work on client work after that. And then so it was like, I knew that like I had to move away from that because, and I was like, I will do anything. Like I will work for free. I will try and get testimonials from people. I'll write like copy for like a tech company that I don't even know anything about. Like I just, anything I could do to get away from that corporate job to just be able to travel full time was I was doing it.
And then, so would that have been 2019?
So graduated in 2019, took my first trip in 2019. Then I went back to corporate and then it was the following year.
Okay. So 2020. So like,
yeah,
it's kind of a weird time to be like, hey, I can finally be nomadic, middle of a pandemic.
Yes.
What was that like? And how did you kind of like, once you're like, okay, I don't have this thing kind of tying me as down as it was before, like, how do you start kind of planning what you want to do?
I don't know, because it was in the middle of a pandemic and I had a trip to Japan, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand planned, canceled. I did trips to the United States. So I was like, I hadn't really done anything through the United States. So I was like, okay, I want to plan a trip out to California. I want to plan a trip to Texas. I want to plan a trip to Philadelphia to hang out with Heather and Travis. And so I did all of those things. But during that time when I first was doing this like client work on my own, it was very hard for me to like get in a routine and like I wasn't strict with myself. So it was kind of like, can I continue to do this? Like, am I going to be structured enough? Am I going to have enough self-discipline to do this on the road? Because when I was in the Pacific Coast Highway, it was like fast travel. Like me and my friend literally were driving like probably 5 or 6 hours a day. And I didn't have time. I was like, oh, just work on my laptop. No, that's not how that works. I can't work on my laptop while we're driving. Like I'm driving a vehicle. And so during that time, I realized that if I want to be able to do this like in the long term, then I'm going to need to be I have to travel to places longer and really experience a country like Mexico. That was a great, like really first, like independent on my own, long-term travel where I could actually like get client work done. And I was really strict with myself and schedules and timelines and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think we've definitely gone through that as well. Like our first, I guess, nomadic trip was in 2016, I think. And we were in Asia and we were just bopping around like country to country. And I think after like 8 months of that, it was just like burnout. Like we're just exhausted from trying to like balance seeing all these things and being in these places. And then also like, you know, maintain work. And at that point, we weren't really like working that much or making that much money. And then you kind of see that take a toll on your bank account. And it's like, okay, we need to kind of like change this up a little bit. And we found, you know, longer periods of time in places where we can actually set a routine, get a co-working space or find a cafe that we want to work at. And that type of thing is so helpful. Like almost having that like Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, but with a little bit more flexibility than you do in corporate. And then being able to live somewhere cool. So like, you know, you leave work and you go to like a taco stand or, you know, whatever it is. And you kind of get that like blend of work-life balance while also enjoying living somewhere else.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's nice too, like you said, the flexibility. Like if you wanted to go take a walk by the beach during the day, like you could. Like that's really where it comes from. It's not that I hate working from 9 to 5. Like most days I am working from like 9 to 4, 9 to 5, whatever. But it's the flexibility of like you can do all of your work on a Monday and then take Tuesday to like go hike or something. That's what I really love about it.
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely like a period of rebellion where you're like, I'm not going to work on weekdays. I'm gonna, like, we were like working on Saturday, Sunday so that we could take Tuesday, Wednesday off.
Yep.
And just doing stuff like that, and like not having any hours, which resulted in us working kind of at all times. And then eventually you kind of get to the point where you're like, okay, I can do like Monday to Friday, like 9 to 5 for the most part. But if it's me who's like making that schedule, then that's cool, right? Like it's totally different than someone else telling you where you have to be. Sometimes you've got to make your own rules. And then, so for you, when did you start podcasting and when did you start The Sweaty Traveler?
Oh, I started last May. So it's been a year. I was living with my parents, just for the sole purpose that I could like not pay rent and travel whenever I wanted. And I was living in their basement and it was like during quarantine and I was like, I hate this. I'm so bored. Like, I feel like I'm not being creative anymore. And so one night I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, The Sweaty Traveler. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but I'm going to write it down in my notebook. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to leave that there, whatever. And then this was in April. And then in May, I was like, I think I'm going to start a podcast called The Sweaty Traveler and talk about all of the things like about travel that nobody is showing on Instagram. Because when I took my first trip, I told you guys about the panic attack I had in Paris. It was like, well, why am I not experiencing all these things I'm seeing on Instagram? Like, why am I not having this beautiful flowy dress in front of the Eiffel Tower at sunset and snapping those pictures?
Picnic?
Like, yes, where is my picnic? Like, there's, excuse me, there's actually like rats everywhere and like it smells like pee. And like, yeah, the Eiffel Tower is beautiful and the Louvre is beautiful and all of these things. But I was feeling really guilty for not like experiencing it the way that I thought it was going to be and like having all these beautiful pictures that I was seeing on Instagram. And so I was like, I want to show that to people and I want to talk about it. And so that's when The Sweaty Traveler was born. And it was funny because I kept putting it off. And I was talking to Heather and Travis again and I was like, hey guys, like what mic do you use for your podcast? And they were like, oh, we use the Audio Technica, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, cool. And a week later, Travis was like, have you ordered it yet? And I was like, no. And literally that same day, my mom texted me and she's like, hey, like, do you know whose microphone this is? And she sent me a picture. And I was like, where did you get that? I was like, did somebody like send it in the mail? And she goes, no, it was in the basement in storage. And I was like, what? And it was the exact microphone that Heather and Travis had recommended. And I don't know where it came from. No one sent it. It wasn't like my mom didn't know that I was like wanting to start a podcast. I was like, Mom, leave that microphone there. I'm taking it from you. And so at that moment I was like, I have to start The Sweaty Traveler and talk about it and like have like that fun, playful side of travel. And also like telling people what travel can actually be like, you know, not just the pretty things that you're seeing online. So that's when it started.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I just love like everything about your brand because I feel like this is something that's kind of frustrated me about the travel space too. And especially kind of like, I guess like the influencer travel space, like these people with these really big followings have these like, I mean, gorgeous photos. Like I'm not going to discredit the beautifulness or the beauty of the photos, but it kind of just like makes you think that that's what, you know, things look like. And I think it's nice to have this sort of like, yes, this is beautiful, but like, these are all the people I edited out of this, or this is what the crowds look like, or this is like the line I waited in to get this photo. Or, you know, I've seen things with like, we haven't been to Egypt, but I've seen people like post the pyramids and then they're like, and right here is like a big dirty city. Like it's literally like adjacent to it apparently. And I think there's so many examples of things like that. And I just think it's like about keeping it real. Like it's not about hating on a country or trying to shine it in a light where it's like, oh, this place is awful or anything like that. I think it's just like, there are realities about travel and about places that are not glamorous. And there's a lot of people not talking about them.
Yeah. And like you said, it's not to hate on a country at all. Like my first time in Florence, Florence is stunning. You see all these beautiful pictures of Florence. And when I got off the train, I was like, I hate it here. I was like, it's so ugly. Because it didn't look like what I had seen on Instagram. And I was like, this cannot be the same place. And finally I realized they're just over edited. Like you said, they're editing people out of their photos. And Florence is like one of my favorite places that I've been. And so I think you just have to be patient and separate like what your expectations are. And now I try not to even look at pictures of a place before I go, because I'm like, that's not even what it's going to be like at all.
Yeah. Yeah. It is kind of this weird, like reality distortion, right? Where it's not only with images, like this applies to travel, but it also applies to just life in general, where like it's showing you a very curated idea of what the world outside looks like. And I know for us, during the kind of points earlier on in this whole situation where we were like sticking to ourselves and not interacting with as many people, like, and you just see the opinions that people are sharing on Facebook and on Twitter, and you're like, am I crazy, or is like everyone else gone crazy? Like, what's happening out here? And then you start like getting in person with people again, and you're like, oh, okay, like, no, I relate with like most people. But it's the same with the images, right? Of like people go out and it's kind of like acting in a way where it's like, we're going to wait in line forever and stage these photos, and we're doing so much stuff. And, you know, it's not what it's really like. But it's also hard because for so many people, travel is that escape in their mind where it's an abstraction, and they want it to be like that. And so when you're the person who shows up and is like, oh, hey, travel's not that great, or like, hey, or here are some hard parts of a travel, it kind of has a similar effect to like, you know, Ellen being like, quarantine's so hard and not cool, right? Do you find people kind of giving you flack for that side of things?
The only time that's happened is the TikTok that I posted about Mexico that kind of went viral, and then everyone got mad at me. I posted a TikTok about like what influencers show about Mexico, like versus what they don't. And it was taken as like, oh, all these glamorous things that I get to do because I am a person of privilege who gets to travel this country, versus like all of the things that like people have to live with. And so that made me realize like maybe like framing that in a different way or explaining it a little bit more. Even though like the purpose of the Sweaty Traveler is to like show both sides of travel. That's the only time that that's really happened. A lot of times people are like, thank you for sharing this. Like, thank you. Because part of the, like one of the biggest reasons, I've said this before, I call it like traveler's guilt. And it's where like there's so many hard things that I had to go through to get to Portugal. Like I had these long layovers, and the JFK was like this, like all these things. Like I almost didn't make it through security. I almost missed my flight. Like I had to take a mega bus there. Like it wasn't like an easy breezy, like get on first class and like make it to Portugal. Like I had like to take all of these steps to get there. And I was like, this is not like, I feel like it shouldn't be this hard. And then like I saw other people, they're like, oh no, it is that hard. Like sometimes when you don't have a lot of money, you have to take a mega bus. You have to take 4 or 5 layovers to get somewhere because you bought a 28-hour flight, which should have been like 6 hours, you know? So I think like, especially for like budget travelers or people who are taking their first trips, that it's really important to show like, sometimes it's not easy, but you do figure it out. And it is worth it in the end to like go through all those like quote unquote hardships to like get there. But it is still a place of privilege to be able to travel like I do.
Thank you to Magic Spoon for sponsoring this episode. For a little while, I've been trying to cut down on carbs and eat healthier. And it can be challenging to find some of the foods you love while also trying to cut down on carbs. That's where Magic Spoon comes in. It has 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net grams of carbs in each serving. It also only has 140 calories a serving. It's keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, low-carb, and GMO-free. You can get a variety pack with 4 flavors that are cocoa, fruity, frosted, and peanut butter. So go to magicspoon.com/wanderers to grab a variety pack and try it today. And be sure to use our promo code WANDERERS, WANDERERS, at checkout to save $5 off your order. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, get your next delicious bowl of guilt-free cereal at magicspoon.com/wanderers and use the code WANDERERS to save $5 off. Thanks again to Magic Spoon for sponsoring this episode. In the world of travel and adventure, it's easy to say, someday I'm going to do this, or someday I'm going to see that. But our friends at Frost River are challenging all of us to start seeking our somedays today.
Frost River Adventure Gear isn't just made with durability in mind. It's made with your next adventure at heart. With a bag or pack from Frost River, you can find adventure in the everyday.
For the past 2 decades, Frost River has set the standard in adventure packs, bags, and gear. Now they're raising the bar. Not only do they source made in the USA materials to handcraft each and every pack, they also repair packs to thwart throwaway culture. and are now using solar energy to create even less waste without compromising quality.
Whether your next adventure is a stroll through a local park or a backcountry camping trip, Frost River has the sustainably made gear that you need.
So stop waiting for your next adventure and start seeking your someday today at frostriver.com/wanderers and use the promo code WANDERERS for free shipping on your next order. Once again, that's www.frostriver.com/wanderers and use the code WANDERERS at checkout.
Thanks so much to Frost River for sponsoring this episode of the show. I think it's kind of interesting, with like sort of the curated world we live in online. It's like a lot of people will show like the destination once they're there. And there is we haven't been on like a long haul flight in so long now because we haven't really been traveling outside of like North America for the last year or so. But it's like, it can be really like unglamorous to hop on a plane and have like 4 layovers and like sleep in an airport and like run to your next gate and almost miss your flight. And, just like your brand says, like you're covered in sweat. It's like you haven't showered for like a day. Yeah. And then you arrive somewhere and, have to like check into your hotel. And then then you can like shower and, go out and explore. And that's where things can be really amazing. But there's all these parts in between that so many people aren't sharing. And I think that is a really big reality. And I think also too, just like with the Mexico TikTok and stuff, there are like, we love Mexico. Mexico's like our favorite country. Yeah. But there are like street corners you turn on that smell like pee and garbage. Like that's not nice. Like
just like LA and New York, it's the same thing. It's just like, you see the beautiful buildings for New York, for example, you see the skyscrapers and like the beautiful sunsets and the rooftops and whatever, but there also are tons of crime and like trash. So it's like anywhere you go. And I think, I don't know. I think that I could have framed it in a different way. And I think that maybe it was like taken, because in TikTok you have like 150 characters to explain what you're trying to get across. So I think that was a little difficult too, but anyways.
Yeah. I think it's like Ryan kind of mentioned this before, like people sort of think of travel as like escapism. And I definitely get it. Like if you work at home and maybe your job is fine, but you don't necessarily love it. And it's kind of like you spend your whole year saving for your like 2-3 week vacation. It's like in your mind, you don't want to think about this place that you've like idolized as like having anything that's kind of bad about it because you have this short amount of time to go see this place. And I know we've gotten some like negative feedback on some of our podcast episodes when we talk about like, oh, here's the negatives of a place.
I feel like it's kind of like one of those things where like maybe you can like talk shit about your parents, but like if one of your friends does it one time, says something about your mom, you're like, whoa, what did you just say?
Yes, that's so true. That's so true. I love that. Yeah, I think so too. And I also, I don't know because I haven't, saved like, I would just quit jobs instead of like waiting for my 2-week vacation, whatever. But I think like if I was in that position and I don't know for sure, like I would want to not have these like super high expectations and then run into the crappy situations and be like, oh, like I wasn't expecting that. Like I thought it was going to be like so much better. So I just think like the Sweaty Traveler in general is like a fun brand that like tries to show like the realities while also like showing some of the fun stuff as well. But yeah, I just like, even for example, one of my guests, Jeff Jenkins, his like tagline is he teaches chubby people to travel the world. And it was like really cool I love him. He's so great. You guys should go follow him on Instagram. He's hilarious. He like was like, nobody's talking about what it's like for a chubby person to like sit on a plane and like a chubby person to go scuba diving. Like they don't have wetsuits for like plus size people. Like, and so it's just really cool to like bring different types of realities like to people's attention and just like get people thinking about like travel for all different types of people.
And I agree with what you said. Like if you're just looking at kind of like you experience, like if you're just looking at these like amazing photos and then you go somewhere, it's kind of going to be a letdown. Like I feel sort of similar where I'd rather know like the good things about a place and also, the not great things about a place, because I recognize that like each place has, kind of like their ugly side. And that goes for pretty much, I think, like every place in the world.
Everywhere,
like, I don't know if I know of one place that I'm like, oh yeah, every street is perfect and everywhere's clean and every human's so nice. And like,
it almost goes the other way. Like sometimes you're like, we've been a few places in Mexico where it's like, you go to some of these areas of cities where everything's new, everything's shiny, all the grass is like trimmed. And you're like, this place is completely missing its soul, So it's like, there's the good side and then there's the shadow side of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I also like really, really urge people, like, just because you go somewhere once and it's a bad experience does not mean that you shouldn't go back there. I did not like London at all. I was like, but it was rainy and it was cold. I mean, not that London's not like that a lot of the year, but like I was like, I hate this. And I was in a bad mood. And like the entire time I was like, I just don't think I want to come back here. And I went back and I loved it. So I think it's always just like, there's so many variables that go into, you know, making a place great. And I think always giving a place a second like chance and opportunity is, I urge that a lot on my podcast.
Yeah. It's so funny how with like travel, we're like asked, not even asked, we do it. And then people like ask us about like places like, oh, you went to like Glasgow for 3 days. Like, how is it there? Kind of like you would know, right? When you like, we've lived lots of places where we meet people and like, they haven't even done, you know, half the things that are there, and you've lived there for like years. So
yeah,
it is kind of funny to think that we could like get our thumb and be like, oh, we understand this place completely because we spent 4 days there.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think something else that I think is worth mentioning is this idea that like, I love what you said about going to visit a place twice. I think there's places that, you know, we've gone and maybe stayed in the wrong location or gone in the wrong time of year. And, you know, weather and accommodation can completely make or break a trip. But I also think like this idea that we can't dislike places is kind of weird. Like, yeah. I think it's completely fine for travelers to not like places, and we shouldn't be shaming people because they went somewhere that they didn't like. Like, it's okay to, you know, go to Mexico and not like it. I mean, I'm probably going to like try to convince you why you should come back and where you should go, what you should eat so that you can love it. No, I know you do, but anyone else.
Yes.
But like, I have a friend who's like, I don't like Bali. And I'm like, how do you not like Bali? I love Bali. And she has all these reasons. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. Everything you're saying is true. And I think it's completely fine for you to like, not like this place. Like, why would you spend your time and energy trying to like somewhere if it's just not for you?
Exactly. I like to ask people on the podcast, I'm like, have you been somewhere you don't like? And people are always like, well, I don't know. I would always go back. And I'm like, okay, but like, is there a place you didn't like, you do not like? And they're very hesitant to answer the question. And someone asked me a place, I did not like Rome. It was too hot. I didn't like it was all touristy. I didn't think you could find like as good of restaurants as in Florence or in the other small, like the Amalfi Coast. Like, I think like the homier, like older Italian, like smaller towns is what I like to focus on. But Rome, I was like, I hated it. And it like breaks my mom's heart because I grew up very Catholic and my mom was like, no, that's like the place where like that's Catholics have to love Rome. And I'm like, well, I didn't like it. It just wasn't for me. And of course I would go back because I've only been there once. I would definitely try it again. But it always is a shock to people when I tell them like, oh, like Rome just isn't like my place.
Your chances of getting an Italian passport now just...
Yep. Yeah.
Italian immigration's sure. Listening. They're
Noted.
Like, must love Rome to get
I
passport.
love Italy.
That's the thing though, seriously. Is like cities and countries are not like necessarily the same thing, if that makes sense. Yes. Like, we can love a country and not love every city in it. Like, yeah, I feel like most probably like Americans or Canadians can relate to that. Like, I love America. I think it is a great country, you know, for all of its faults. Like, it's amazing. There are cities in the US that I'm good without. Like, yep, I've been there, maybe been there twice, and I'm like, I'm fine. I don't really need to go back. Like, it's good.
Absolutely. And I mean, like, even I felt guilty. We were doing the Pacific Coast Highway, and you see all these influencers go to Joshua Tree and whatever. And I didn't really like Joshua Tree. And I was like, am I a weirdo? Like, did I do something wrong? And I'm like, no, it's freaking hot. There's really nothing to do. You can't really hike between the hours of 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. because it's 107 degrees. And I was like, these reasons are like valid, and it's okay to not like a place. Like, I still have to remind myself, like, I don't need to convince myself to like somewhere, just because someone else did.
Yeah, I have the comedian I like described it as a litter box for drug addicts.
It literally is. That's so funny. It literally is. I met some cool people there, but I'm like, what do you guys do all day? Like, there's like there's no, like I feel like in these cities, like there's usually factories or like places to work. I'm like, there's literally nowhere to like work like here. I don't know what people do in Joshua Tree. If you're from Joshua Tree and listening, I'm sorry. I'll come back and try it again.
We're losing all our Joshua Tree audience.
I'm sorry.
No, send us an email if you love Joshua Tree. Tell us why you love it, because we haven't been. Yes. So I'm down to visit.
I would definitely go. It's the sky at night gets so dark that it almost turns like purple, and you feel like you can like touch the moon, and it has like that old Western, like it's a little bit like tumbleweeds in the wind type of like vibe. But yeah, like more than 2 days you're sweating and you're dying. And when you book a camper with no air conditioning, that can also be a factor. So yeah.
And so for you, Mac, you've been traveling for quite a while, but like kind of in the earlier stages of the nomad journey of being able to travel and work. What's kind of like on the top of your list for places you want to go and things you want to do in the next couple of years?
I would love to do my Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand trip. I booked a flight to a one-way to Japan for next March, I think. $300, one of those like mistake fares or whatever. So hopefully I can do that trip. That's like, Vietnam has always been at the top of my list, and I have some really good family friends who live there. So there, and then this summer, hopefully like spending a longer period of time in Europe. I'm hopefully going to go see our friends Sarah and Mitko in Bulgaria. I really want to do Slovenia. I would love to spend a couple months in Italy if possible, and just do a little bit more of Eastern Europe. But the Southeastern Asian is a big one for me, and I would really like to spend some time in Russia as well.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome. We haven't been to Russia.
No, it's a place that I feel like would be interesting to go and spend longer time though. I think that'd be like, it's the type of place where it'd be so hard to go for like a week or 2 weeks even. Like you'd want to be able to stay because it's so gigantic and so much going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like I've done like month-long trips, and I just like hung out with you guys in Mexico for a month, and then I was back in Puerto Vallarta for a couple of weeks, and I really want to go out on this like new nomad adventure and because I do travel alone, like do like Italy maybe alone and see like, can I do that? Like really just pushing myself outside of my comfort zone, because now sitting here thinking about it, like my heart's beating and I'm like, that seems scary to me, like to go somewhere completely alone in one spot for a month and just like work and like try to make a life there for a bit. So that's like something that I'm really looking forward to doing, and like just seeing if I can like build my confidence the more I'm out and traveling and like being a little bit more nomadic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love that. I think one of the things for Ryan and I, after we'd like backpacked a lot together, was we were like, let's both take like solo trips so that we kind of like, can just like stretch that muscle a little bit and just see what it's like to like be on our own. And I feel like both of us got so much out of that. And I think especially for me, like I really recognized how much having like, especially like a man with me, like kind of made me feel safer. And then kind of trusting in the fact that like I'm strong on my own and can like take care of myself, I think was so important, like as like a young woman. And I think that it's also really cool to just see people traveling solo, because that's what kind of like what you mentioned at the beginning, like, you can just wait around for people to want to go with you, but like you could be waiting forever with that. And if you want to do it, you got to just go and do it and trust that you'll be fine and like meet people, which I feel like always happens, right?
Yeah.
Like you're like, I'm going to spend the month alone. And then you're like, okay, I have 10 new best friends.
Yeah. Traveling solo for me has been like, not to be dramatic, but it's literally changed my life. And I notice when I'm traveling with other people, I use them as a little bit of a crutch. Like sometimes I'll ask more questions, or I'll be like, oh, like you'll figure it out. And when you're alone, you have to figure everything out on your own. And that can be scary, but also like, you're like, damn, I'm a badass. Like I just figured out how to do all of these things. Or like, I just like ran through the airport and almost missed my layover, but I didn't because I knew like to talk to the gate. Or like just you're building this confidence, and it flows into so many other parts of your life. And like, now I'm like, oh, I could go on a 2, 3, 4, like however long trip by myself. Like I can do that. Like I know, and I believe in myself. And like, it really, now when I'm in Columbus, I put myself out there and I meet people all the time. Like I used to be scared to introduce myself to people at coffee shops, but traveling forces you to do that a little bit more. So like now when I come home, I get to like make new friends and meet new people that way. But I think like traveling alone, the one thing about it that I don't like is like I really wish that I could share certain experiences with people. And sometimes like when I saw the Eiffel Tower for the first time, like I literally was like crying. Like it was just like this long waited moment of getting to Europe and like always wanting to travel, and like this iconic thing was like in front of me, and I can't believe I'm standing here. So I was like trying to FaceTime my mom and like trying to FaceTime my sisters, and like they're at school and work, and I'm like, oh my God, like no one's here to experience this with me. So I like to, you know, talk about it with other people who've experienced the same thing, but that's like one of the only things about solo travel that I think is like difficult. But
yeah, I can relate to that. Just I went to Peru like 9 years ago now. I was actually with a friend, but she got like insanely bad food poisoning. So she made it up to Machu Picchu, like barely. She's like with a barf bag, and she just couldn't do anything though. So we parked her like by the llamas for like the whole day, and I just went and explored by myself. And I got to this viewpoint where you just like, it's like the iconic viewpoint where you see it. And I was like, yeah, same with you, like close to tears. And I'm just like looking around, like, who can I share this moment with?
Yes.
And there's just a bunch of like, you know, strangers around me that are like, she okay?
Yeah. Yeah. And you're like, I wish someone could take a picture of me.
And go.
Yeah, exactly. I like always am standing in crowds of people, and I'm like, I don't speak any other languages. I wish I did, but I'll always like try and listen for like the English speakers. And I'm like, okay, I can ask them to take my picture. So that's like where I'm at in front of these like iconic places.
Yeah, no, I love that. Amazing. Well, this conversation's been so fun, Mac. It's been awesome getting to chat more about travel with you and actually have it on the podcast. We've talked a lot about travel, you know, offline and stuff in our time in Mexico together. For people who want to, you know, go follow along with your podcast, learn more about you, follow your travels to Europe over the summer, where can they go to find that?
Yeah, so the Sweaty Traveler website is currently being constructed. So eventually you can just go to thesweatytraveler.com. But right now on Instagram, you can follow me at The Sweaty Traveler. And on TikTok, I'm just Sweaty Traveler because I had to change my name. And on Instagram, I actually have this link in my bio. You guys can leave your sweaty stories as a voicemail, and I can play them on the podcast. So anything like missing a flight, you know, being charged by a rhino, like getting a flat tire in the middle of the desert, like go there, leave your stories. I'd love to play them on the podcast and hear from you. But yeah, you can find the Sweaty Traveler podcast anywhere you listen to Amanda and Ryan's podcast.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Mac.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you want more, make sure to check out The World Wanders Insider, available on Patreon at patreon.com/theworldwanderers.
For show notes, head over to theworldwanderers.com. Find us on social media at The World Wanderers Podcast, and join the private Facebook community at World Wanderers, a community for travelers.
You can always get in touch with us at info@theworldwanderers.com. And if you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps us find new listeners.
See you next time.